Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and these are the films I think the Tomato Meter got wrong for the first half of 2018. So, these Rotten Tomato videos are a frequent collaboration with Rachel Wagner, in which we both share films we think are rated way too high on Rotten Tomatoes or rated way too low on the aggregation website. Rachel and I have been doing these videos for several years actually at this point. They are definitely a highlight on both channels, and I always look forward to discussing the films we think the Rotten Tomatoes critics just completely missed the mark on. So after you check out this video, make sure you head over to Rachel Wagner's channel so you can see the films she selected for her most overscored and underscored films of the beginning of 2018. Of course, I'm going to leave all of her channel information as well as her social media info in the description down below. So for the beginning portion of 2018, I have to say I have felt like an outsider on so many films, whether it be the actual critics themselves or it's just the online film world that I'm a part of. I felt like I just wasn't getting it with so many films, whether it be hatred thrown toward films or just love lavished over these movies. I just wasn't getting it. But once I looked at Rotten Tomato scores, I'm going to admit there weren't a lot of movies that I actually would take from being certified fresh and bump them into rotten territory, or movies I would take from being rotten and throw them all the way up to a certified or even just fresh rating. So that's usually how I do these videos, but I'm changing up the rules this year because there are a lot of movies with scores that I think are far too low, but they may fall in guilty pleasure land for me, and I don't know that I can personally even justify giving them a completely fresh rating. So let's actually go ahead and kick this off with the more positive end of the list. The films that I think were too harshly scored when it came to Rotten Tomatoes. So before I share my 4 picks here, I'm going to share some honorable mentions because there were a lot of films I think were unharshly criticized this year. Starting off with the movie 12 Strong, it hit 54%. Almost to that fresh rating, but I definitely think it deserved to at least to be fresh. Gringo was a comedy that pretty much no one else liked except for me that I've seen. It came in at a 39%. This one might be just a pure guilty pleasure, that's why I didn't put it on my list. I thought it was funny with nice sprinkles of intelligent writing, so I think it deserved a higher rating. And my final honorable mention is The First Purge. This film sits at 54%, so it's also really close to the fresh rating. I thought it was exactly what I wanted from the film, exactly what I went in for, with a load of social commentary that I thought worked well for the setting and fit right into the franchise. So, now on to my 4 picks for the movies that Rotten Tomato just scored way too low. And we're going to start with the lowest score that I have here, and the one I don't think anybody really agrees with me on, and that's Death Wish. This film came in at a very low 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. And reading over the reviews, I didn't really agree with why it has that 18%. That's why I decided to keep this one as my 4th and final pick on what to talk about. Many reviewers cited their disliking of the film because it was a pro-gun agenda, and I don't understand that take. I didn't understand it at all, actually. I think it highly poked fun at how easy and ridiculous our gun laws are in this country. And I thought that was actually done really well. It was handled very well. Plus, it was like an old throwback 80s style action. The action was brutal, and I think that Eli Roth added just the amount of his horror gore flair into this over-the-top action film to make it interesting. Now this is one I don't think I would bump all the way up to fresh. It definitely had its flaws, and if you want to see my full thoughts on any of these films, check out my reviews for the films. It definitely has its flaws, but I definitely think it should be probably around the 50 percentiles where I would personally rate this. It's way better than an 18%, and if you ask me, it is certainly on par with films that other people seem to rave about that I just didn't understand, such as The Den of Thieves. So, Death Wish just got a raw deal in my book. It felt like a weird political way of trying to take down a film over use of guns, and it was completely misused, misconstrued, and there are a ton of films with guns that could easily be given the same criticism. So, I didn't get it, and I don't think it deserved an 18%. My next selection for underscored on Rotten Tomatoes is Tag. So this comedy is at 55% on the tomato meter currently. And that's a pretty decent score. It's almost fresh, just 5% off of that fresh rating. But it definitely deserves to be in the fresh rating. I think Tag was a lot of fun. It had a lot of laughs to be had. There were a lot of really great positive set pieces that worked very well. Some wonderful performances. I loved Isla Fisher. Of course, Jeremy Renner stole the show. But it even managed to get a good performance out of Ed Helms. There was a lot of heart. It had some really fun things to say. And I think it was definitely fun enough to be up there with the other top-rated comedies of the year. So I'm just so shocked to see those ones up in the 80s, while Tag got stuck at 55. I don't get it. I think it was definitely fun enough to be fresh. Speaking of comedies, I have Life of the Party as my next pick. Another one I don't think many are going to agree with me on. But honestly, I laughed quite a bit watching Life of the Party, and I know that it's just because I'm predisposed to enjoying Melissa McCarthy's material as a comedian. I think she's fun, I think she's funny, and I laughed quite a bit in this movie. There are at least 3 set pieces in this film that are hilarious, and that dinner scene alone was worth the price of admission to me. I thought it was so good, and Maya Rudolph just killed it in this movie. But it's not too far off of a lot of other Melissa McCarthy material. But what really elevates this for me and makes me think it should also at least be around 55% or higher was this really sophisticated, really well done mother-daughter relationship. It is not overly sanitized, but it's not this horrible, contentious relationship. It felt authentic and it felt real, and honestly, I think it's one of the better mother-daughter screen adaptations we've seen in some time, especially for a comedy. So I think 38% was a bit too low for Life of the Party. And then my final pick for underscored is Tomb Raider, which came in at a 49% on the tomato meter. I thought this movie was so much fun. I had a great time with this Tomb Raider reboot. Alicia Vikander killed it as Lara Croft in this movie, and while there are plenty of problems to be had here as well, overall, it does exactly what I was hoping it would do. It provides some awesome action set pieces. It injects the amount of fun and camp that the first films could never quite get right. And it gives you an awesome action movie. It was really thrilling. It was really fun. The rating of the tomb was awesome. So there is really no reason, I think, for this film to be under a 60% and not be able to reach the fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So now for the overscore, the films that I just don't quite understand what critics saw in these films. So I only have one honorable mention here, and the only reason I'm even doing this honorable mention is because I haven't actually seen it, but I'm going to be honest, I'm baffled because the trailers showed me a straight-to-Netflix film that somehow made its way into theaters, and that's Uncle Drew. I'm just stunned that it got up to 65%. Stunned. Of course, can't actually put it on my list because who knows? Maybe by some miracle it is deserving of that score. But a Pepsi commercial made into a film that looks like it should have been sent straight to DVD in 2002 doesn't seem worthy of that fresh rating to me. So kicking us off on my official list, I'm going with the lowest scored of the films, and that is Peter Rabbit at 62%. This film got much higher praise than I ever imagined it would, both from film critics as well as just film audiences and other people out there on this online film community. People had a much more positive reaction to this film than I had anticipated. And I will say, it's maybe not necessarily as terrible as even I had anticipated going in. It still does not deserve to be anywhere near fresh on the tomato meter, though. This is one of two comedies that makes it onto my overscored list that has this exact same problem. Peter Rabbit plays the same 4 or 5 handful of jokes over and over and over again. And they're not really that funny to begin with. So whether it be this pig being sophisticated but eating, these weird food jokes and these salad jokes, none of them really work. James Corden's style of humor, I guess, could come across well for a children's film, a family film. It just doesn't work for me, so I wasn't really laughing. But really the problem with Peter Rabbit, in my eyes, is that Peter Rabbit is unlikable. They turned a sweet character into a shrill brat this entire film, and he takes so long to get to a point of likability that I just didn't care. But then we have Domino Gleeson's character, who also is not really likable either. So we're playing off of these two unlikable characters, awkwardly pining for this woman's affection. Mind you, this is a rabbit and a human being pining after the same woman's affection, but you don't really want to see either of them succeed. So it's chock full of lame jokes that just repeat over and over and over and over again throughout the entire film. A lot of slapstick, a lot of which doesn't work. And two main characters that aren't likable. And that's why I just don't get the high praise for Peter Rabbit. Next up, I have Adrift, which sits at 72% on the tomato meter. In many ways, Adrift is a solid film. It has two really great performances. In particular, Shailene Woodley delivers a really good performance in this film. The chemistry between her and Sam Claflin is nice, but unfortunately, not much else beyond that is anything to write home about. It really undoes itself with this horrible narrative structure that completely dismantles any sort of romance that we could have felt, and it also completely dismantles the thriller aspect, the survival film aspect of this movie. It instead chops both of those up and flings them back and forth, so we're jumping all over the place, never fully able to connect to either story. One story that feels near pointless because we're living the second half of that story simultaneously. So I never was invested in the romance because I don't think they properly established the romance. And then the moments we're out there drifting on the ocean in the boat were mostly just boring. It comes around just a little bit at the end, but if your shtick is a romantic survival drama and you fail on providing the romance or a thrilling survival drama, I don't understand how you can be considered fresh. I don't think this is a horrible movie by any means. It looks pretty and is well acted, but it just failed to really grasp my attention or hook me in any sort of way that makes me think it's deserving of a 72%. Next up, I have Unsane, which I think might be the most shocking film to make this list, but I just didn't quite get the praise for this movie. I get the praise for Claire Foy because she was fantastic, and she pretty much single-handedly carried this film out of being terrible, in my opinion. This movie is not what I was hoping it would be. That's the first strike against it. I was hoping we were going to be back and forth. Is she crazy? Is she sane? Is she crazy? Or is this guy really her stalker? Is she imagining things? But we do away with that pretty early on, and it actually is fairly obvious pretty early on which way that's going. And so that full aspect of the film is taken out almost immediately early on in the movie. And then you look at the script. Things happen in really sporadic ways, really convenient ways, really stereotypical kidnap thrillery type of ways. From timings to character motivations to character behaviors, they all felt like been there, done that. And then we get to the gimmick of the film. It was shot on an iPhone. Another gimmick that's also been done and been done to better effect before. I really think there was no reason to shoot this movie on the iPhone. There was no reason. You could create that same sense of claustrophobia with professional camera work. And guess what? We could actually see what's happening. We would actually get good quality picture because this film looked terrible. I know people have praised it for this camera or whatever, but it looked terrible. I'm sorry. The cinematography was not good. And really, the weird framing that he decided to go to, the completely breaking of the rules when it came to setting up your actual frame of the shot, didn't work for me either. So he broke all the rules, and it just didn't pay off in my book. It just kind of felt like people went along with this gimmick, and maybe what the director intended behind the gimmick, instead of what was actually delivered in the film. And I really don't think it deserved an 80%, certainly. And I would personally have it in rotten territory. And then my final choice for overscored is the highest score out of the films that I selected. And that's Game Night at 82%. It's perfectly fine. It is a harmless, teethless, fine little comedy film. But for an 82%? Where? The biggest problem for me is I didn't laugh. I chuckled a time or two, but I didn't laugh. And this film had the same problem that Peter Rabbit had, in that we had the same 3 or 4 jokes that just went on and on and on throughout the entirety of this movie, and none of them had a payoff that ended up being worth it, really. Between this whole sleeping with a celebrity nonsense to these Mandingo parties that was just like, what in the world? To the awkward neighbor that I know people thought was really funny, but he just didn't work for me. The whole shtick just fell flat pretty early on, in my opinion. It could have worked, but again, they just beat it into the ground as we just replayed and replayed and replayed the same jokes over and over and over again. The performances were all good, but Jason Bateman was playing Jason Bateman, so what else did you expect from him? Rachel McAdams was wonderful. Everybody was good. It looked fine. It breezed along well enough with this concept. But then it would introduce these flourishes of, like, really incorporating Game Night in, and then it would drop them. And then we had sparks of what could be a more funny joke, but then we'd go back to that recycled joke we've already visited 5 times. So I see the underlyings of a film that I would have really enjoyed. Instead, I had a film that, if it hadn't gotten so much praise, I might have already forgotten even came out this year. For me, Game Night came up as an unremarkable, fine comedy that I would switch places with Tag in their tomato meter. I would put this down around that 55% Tag got, and that just makes it all the more baffling that this was viewed as 27 points higher than that film. I don't get it. But again, these are just my personal opinions, and this year I seem to just be on a completely different wavelength than a lot of other folks. So I know you're probably going to disagree with a lot of the films that I picked and selected for this video. I'm so interested to see the films that Rachel picked. I already am positive about one of her picks, but I'm interested to see the rest of the films she selected. So make sure you head over to her channel, give her channel some love, watch her video, comment, like, all the whole shebang. And most importantly, make sure that you leave your most overscored and underscored movies of 2018 thus far in the comment section down below. And let me know what you think of the films that I just am not getting. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on our latest videos. I love you all so much for your support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!